It doesn't matter to him that we're building one of the biggest wind turbines, or that we built the first hybrid battery gas turbine, or that our technology powers a third of the planet. What matters to him is that it's getting dark, and he has homework to do.
Welcome, everyone, to this session of EEI 2020. I'm thrilled and honored to have a special guest that I'll be talking with today. He's Neil Chatterjee, the Honorable Neil Chatterjee, the Chairman of the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission. Mr. Chairman, welcome.
Thank you for having me. Great to be with you.
It's great to have you. I was reflecting that it was almost 3 years ago exactly that you gave one of your first speeches as chairman to the EEI Board of Directors meeting in Colorado Springs, and a lot has happened in those 3 years. Do you have any reflections on your tenure and what's been going on at the commission and thoughts over that time period?
Well, it's pretty remarkable that it's been 3 years. 3 years have gone by quickly, but as you stated, a lot has happened in that time. First and foremost, I went from having the opportunity to speak with the board in person in Colorado Springs to now you and I are doing this virtually via Zoom. So clearly a great number of things have changed. In terms of when I think over the past 3 years at the commission, my thoughts just immediately go to the huge amount of work we've been able to do. And of course, the people at the commission, my fellow commissioners, and especially the great commission staff who have helped us accomplish so much. When I walked into the building, about 3 years ago last week, we were facing a significant backlog of cases that had stacked up during the extended no quorum period. And if tackling that backlog weren't challenge enough, we were soon hit with the DOE NOPR, which raised some important questions, but really also thrust the commission into the spotlight and presented an additional challenge. But despite those curveballs, we were able to somehow keep our heads down during those early weeks and months and focus on our work. We tackled that backlog, and my team and I really hit our strides. In the second phase of my chairmanship, it didn't begin under circumstances that anyone would want. After the passing of my beloved friend and colleague, Chairman McIntyre, we had to step in again. And again, there had been a bit of a backlog that had accrued, and my team and I and my colleagues came together with staff of the commission to again work through it. And now to think of what we've dealt with the past 6 months and the challenges being posed by COVID-19 and this pandemic, if nothing else, if not for all of the significant decisions and policy matters that the commission has tackled over the past 3 years, just the mere fact that we dealt with and cleared two pretty substantial backlogs and have kept the commission functioning at really not just 100%, but I think we are operating, at 120% effectiveness right now. Just those facts alone, I think I'm quite pleased and proud of what we've been able to accomplish over what has really been a very busy 3 years.
Yeah, thank you for working so hard and guiding the staff. I know they appreciate it. So the pandemic hit us all about mid-March. What was your ability and you as the leader of the entire institution to guide people through that? What did you do, and are there going to be permanent changes that come out of this pandemic period?
Yeah, so my first and foremost thought went to the staff, and I wanted to ensure that the staff were safe and that their health and safety and the health and safety of their families was our first priority. Then we had to focus on the technology. So were we to go to full telework, did we have the systems in place to accommodate that transition? And we had to test those systems. And I was really, really impressed with how well everyone came through and made that transition. So once we successfully transitioned the staff to full telework, we then had to take a step back and consider what the impacts and challenges posed by the pandemic, what the implications of those would be on the regulated community, on stakeholders. And so we immediately took steps to make clear to commission stakeholders what our procedures and processes would be, what steps we would take to waive certain compliance requirements or to factor in the impacts of the pandemic when weighing compliance with certain commission obligations. We wanted to ensure that that we were still able to take stakeholder input and hear from the public. And I think we've learned a great bit from what we did, from establishing the Office of the Pandemic Liaison to making those initial taking those initial steps to provide that clarity. We didn't want people guessing as to, well, I'm sure that down the road the commission will understand that I was facing these challenges, and that's why they'll give me leeway down the road. We wanted to be clear upfront on how we would address filings as they came in, and we wanted to send the signal to the regulated community that they could count on the commission to be open for business, that with all the other stressors that we're all facing, one less burden would be worrying about whether filings at the commission could be handled in a timely manner. In terms of what will be permanent, what changes will take place, that's something that we're going to have to handle on a case-by-case basis. We're still working to get to a point where America, the industry, the commission, we can all get back up on our feet. I think our focus and priority is there. Once we get to a point where we begin the recovery and start inching back towards normalcy, I think we'll go back and look at the steps that we have taken and assess what was effective, what created perhaps greater efficiencies, and what could be maintained.
Well, you and I chatted about it a few months ago, where you were pleased with how well telework was, and we had a good talk about it because everybody's been forced into it. So there's a collective feeling of being able to handle it and accountability, and we're proud of how you've handled that and the productivity of the staff, because as you said, they really haven't missed a beat on this, and you jumped right in, and the industry appreciates it. What are your thoughts on how the energy industry generally, that includes more than just electric companies, how they've responded in the face of the pandemic in their relationships with the commission?
It's really been remarkable. And, I actually was thinking about it, a couple of weeks ago, and I got emotional thinking about some of the genuine sacrifices and truly heroic acts that everyday people are taking within the energy industry to get us through the challenges being posed by this pandemic. I've had so many people comment to me that with everything they're facing, something that they had previously taken for granted, that the lights come on, that in these hot summer months, the air comes on. They no longer take it for granted. They understand with everything else they're having to deal with that electricity and that reliable, affordable, consistent supply of electricity has been essential to getting them through this. And I think there's a greater appreciation for all of the work that goes into that, from linemen who already right now would be making tremendous sacrifices to deal with hurricane season, to now have to factor in the additional variables with the challenges being posed by COVID while still simultaneously doing their jobs is truly remarkable. The folks who are working in control rooms, who, while everyone else, we at the commission took to teleworking and working from home, they moved home to work and lived on site so that they could stay healthy and ensure that their control rooms were operating. To folks who are focusing on cybersecurity and the threats to the grid and increased vulnerability during a challenging pandemic, who have stepped up. It's truly been remarkable. I've been proud of the small role that the commission's been able to play, whether it's participating in the ESCC or, like I said, just being open for business. I think when this is all said and done and we all get up off the mat, right now, the focus is where it needs to be on our frontline healthcare workers, on first responders, on law enforcement. But when this is all over, I hope everyone in the energy sector takes a moment to just reflect on the truly Herculean efforts that have gone into keeping the lights on during this pandemic.
Well, you've done some shouting out of the good work that, as you noted, the wide range of industry players have accomplished over this challenging time. And line workers are clearly heroes with summer storms and hurricanes. And I think you're right. The people really appreciate, I would say, the value, in addition to the comfort, that electricity particularly provides during this time. And we appreciate that you and your colleagues were part of the ESCC calls. And we've tried very hard to keep the commission informed as an industry, and your staff have been very welcoming of that. But despite this pandemic, the commission has been very busy and putting out quite a number of orders, big and small. And specifically, we want to thank you for getting the final rule out on PURPA. We know it took a long time, some controversy there, big issues that really hadn't been addressed for decades. And I'm just curious if you have some kind of thoughts after that process is now at least over at the commission as to, again, your reflections on that issue and the process.
Well, again, I think it was something that was certainly a challenge, but it was time. I think that so much has changed in our energy landscape and in the energy markets since PURPA was initially implemented. And it was simply time for the commission, as Congress directed us to do, to revisit our PURPA regulations and look to see what changes we could make within our regulations to modernize PURPA and to really better align it with the realities of this marketplace. What I think was so critical was the input that we got from stakeholders. We had a robust record. And as you know, the key to successful, legally durable actions by the commission, you've got to have a strong record. And so I think certainly a tremendous amount of credit goes to my colleagues who worked tirelessly on this, to the staff, and the staff team in particular really worked extraordinarily hard over a number of years to put this together. You combine that with the thoughtful comments that we had in our record at multiple stages. I think the final product is something that I'm proud of, and I think it's something that will benefit consumers for decades to come.
Yeah, customers are potentially going to save billions of dollars thanks to that. And they, of course, mostly won't appreciate the hard work that the commission put into this, but it's real. And again, we thank you very much for those efforts. And hopefully Bob Solomon is comfortable defending it, again, with the way that the record reads when it is undoubtedly challenged in the circuit courts.
Bob will be ready.
Moving a little bit on a different topic, and I'll be very, very general here, but transmission is near and dear to your heart and my heart, and whether customers know it or not, it should be to theirs as well. And we, I think, have a general consensus that at least most people believe that transmission needs to be expanded and updated, modernized in some cases. There are areas of the country where these assets are many decades old. And we are dependent on the transmission system really to move large amounts of renewable energy as the grid gets cleaner and greener from where it's produced to where it's consumed. And of course, the commission several years ago had Order 1000, a lot of mixed reviews on that, but undertaking that as a rehaul would be an enormous challenge, and you're extremely busy now, so realize that that's something that the commission's not going to take on. But what's your advice very generally on how, as a nation, we can expand the transmission network in ways that are effective and timely, given the rapid transition that our industry is going through for a lot of reasons, but also because customers want a cleaner and greener grid?
I'm not sure that this is advice per se, but I can tell you how I've come to approach transmission policy. Since starting at the commission, this has really been a key area of focus for me, ensuring that we have the right transmission infrastructure in place. As you noted, and I've spoken to the fact that Order 1000 reforms would be a significant undertaking. And while everyone may agree that changes are needed, that's really where the consensus ends, and trying to build that consensus on exactly what the reforms should look like is where it really gets to be a challenge. And so it's not that we have so much on our plate that we can't take this on. The staff is incredibly talented. It's that it would be such a significant undertaking that would draw staff resources, that would draw stakeholder resources, that I'm not sure at this time it would be particularly effective or the best use of the commission's resources. So we've looked to other ways that we can move the ball forward on infrastructure. And my current focus is really on ROE, incentives, and efforts to modernize the grid with new technologies. I want to really drill down on these nearer term issues and try to bring them across the finish line during my tenure. I think that would have as significant an outcome on transmission, which is so critical, as you mentioned, to moving towards decarbonization and ensuring that that grid of the future, that flexible, resilient grid is there for the energy transition.
Well, you've mentioned your interest in the new technologies for, I think, as long as you've been on the commission. And particularly lately, there's been added interest by the commission on this. We've had a couple of technical conferences, one on dynamic line ratings, one on grid enhancing technologies. And curious, just your thoughts, anything that surprised you out of this, anything that you've learned, and knowing that storage is also a technology that is of great interest to you, kind of your thoughts as to how those thoughts have developed and what you've learned, and again, perhaps any surprises out of these efforts.
Look, it's exciting. You know, I've always been a big believer in innovation. I think that, you know, the reason that we are truly, all of us, consumers, the economy, the environment, have all benefited from the energy transition. A lot of it has been driven by innovation across the board. And so I've always been someone that's been excited about the possibilities around new technologies and finding ways to incorporate those technologies and remove barriers to entry. And so it's really been exciting. These topics have been of great interest to me since coming to the commission. We have a strong staff team that's been working on these issues. You mentioned storage, you know, moving the ball forward on storage, removing some of those barriers to competition was a big priority of mine, and it's an achievement that I'm proud of. Similarly, looking at aggregated distributed energy resources, I don't want to get ahead of my colleagues on that, but that's been another area where we've put a lot of work over a number of years now to potentially move the ball forward there. And so I'm very bullish on new technologies like storage, and it'll be no surprise to you that I'm really excited about the potential for energy storage as a new transmission technology that can provide more efficient or cost-effective solutions to the benefits of consumers. There's a lot of exciting possibilities here.
Yeah, you are correct, and we appreciate that you've highlighted it. It's really an industry now that's coming into its own. During my time, we kind of treated it the way it wanted to be treated. If it wanted to be considered generation or transmission or something else, it was a nascent industry then, but it's really become something that's going to be a big part of our future. And we appreciate the focus that you've put on it.
Well, it was something that, interestingly enough, was highlighted to me prior to my coming to the commission. I was going through the Senate confirmation process, and Senator Whitehouse and Senator Markey pulled me aside, and they'd been holding up my nomination, and they said that they were optimistic that I would be a good commissioner that they could work with, and they simply asked that I take a hard look at storage and DERs. They didn't ask me to make a commitment. They didn't try and persuade me to take any particular action. They just said, take a hard look at these technologies and what FERC can do to potentially remove some of the barriers to enable them to compete. And what I came to recognize when I came to FERC was that, one, the rulemakings were not nearly as far along as the senators thought. There were a lot of complex issues. Storage was further along than DERs. And so we made the decision to sever the two, focus on storage, got storage done. There were a lot more complex behind the meter issues with DER, a lot of really nuanced legal questions. We've spent a couple of years, working to address those. And again, not wanting to get ahead of my colleagues, but should we be able to move forward on a DER rulemaking, those two things, removing barriers to storage and DERs, I mentioned it on storage, it could be the single most significant action that the commission could have taken to enable the transition to a clean energy future. I think DERs would only build on that. And it's something that I think when I look back on my tenure at the commission, maybe the thing I'm most proud of.
Well, purple will be close to that top too. So again, we appreciate that. And you and I have spoken about this before. I think it was great that you split up storage and DERs because the issues are different, and particularly with DER aggregation, and this is nothing new, even putting aside the legal questions, the operational issues are challenging. The analogy that I've used is that we're going to need the investment in the distribution system to have the same kind of visibility into that system currently lacking that we have on the bulk power system, just because it's a complex network and reliability and safety have to be paramount. And that brings up issues that, it's certainly doable, but it would require major investment that would be authorized by state utility commissions.
And that's why it's so important, to work together with stakeholders, to work together with our state partners, to develop a robust record. And it's something I know that you can appreciate. You, like myself, worked in both the legislative branch and at the commission. Sometimes outside observers wonder why it takes so long to get things done at the commission. It's not the same process as writing a bill, garnering support for the bill, and moving the bill. You just stated it perfectly. There's really, really complex challenges behind these issues, and it just takes time to sort through them, to get the law right, to get the engineering right, to consider, reliability and market dynamics, security dynamics. But that's why I really feel that this experience 3 years in now has been so fulfilling. It's just incredibly interesting and relevant work. And it's a genuine pleasure to I wouldn't say come to the office every day. That's not quite the case with COVID-19, but still to work on these issues every day has been a true honor and a pleasure.
Yeah, I found it intellectually challenging basically every single day. Great camaraderie. And you talk about complexity. We aren't even going to talk about wholesale market rules, and that gets to a whole new level of complexity.
No doubt about it. But again, these issues are important. I'm a big believer in markets, and I think America has benefited tremendously. As I mentioned earlier, consumers, the economy, the environment have all benefited from these markets. But with such a rapidly changing energy landscape, we are constantly having to make iterative changes to better align the markets to ensure proper price signals and the greatest possible efficiency. But whenever you're talking about layering an algorithm on top of an algorithm on top of an algorithm, that's the very definition of complicated.
Well, you mentioned it. The transition is really happening quite rapidly, but when the market rules were set up 20, 25 years ago, it was a very, very different system than it is today. So we wish you the best on dealing with that set of issues. And you have a lot of friends around the country, around the world, in this city, and it's got to be kind of frustrating not to make contact with them because that's one of your attributes. You're very outgoing, and you let people know how you feel good about hanging out with people, and you learn things from them. It's got to be a bit challenging just being kind of stuck at home without those interactions. How are you dealing with that?
It's been tough, but there's pros and cons to it. As you know, these jobs are incredibly demanding and take a lot of time. And both from my tenure in the Senate to working at the commission, there were many days when my kids were asleep when I left in the morning and they were asleep when I got home at night. And then particularly when you add in the required travel that comes with serving on the commission, there were days and sometimes, weeks where I was on the road away from my family. And so while it is no doubt, I'm sad to not be able to engage with my colleagues in person, with the staff at the commission in person, with stakeholders who I as you mentioned, I'm a people person. I learn best by interfacing and interacting with people. I like to hear people's perspectives and talk it through with them. And while I miss that component of it, I am truly trying to appreciate that at the end of the day, my family is safe, we're healthy, we're together, I'm able to do my job. And so I'm truly counting my blessings. And while I certainly miss engaging with folks, I do hope that I will look back and look fondly upon the time that I got to spend with my children as they're growing up.
Oh, what a great attitude. And when you talk about stakeholders, I know that both you and I, particularly you, reached out a lot and participated with some of the NARUC meetings over the last few months. And that's such a wise move. They're such a good group. You've developed excellent relationships with NARUC, and I commend you for it, because state regulators are only growing in importance in terms of the future of the grid, and having as much open communication, recognizing that occasionally state commissions and FERC are going to be on different sides of an issue, it's still very important.
Well, I always think back to, the famous Mike Tyson quote that, everybody has a plan until you get punched in the face. I thought that, we had all done a very good job amongst, federal regulators, state regulators, across the federal government, stakeholders of building relationships and establishing lines of communication. I didn't appreciate how important that was until we were confronted by the challenges of this pandemic. I will tell you, the coordination between the commission and NARUC and ESCC and NERC and with industry stakeholders has been so critical to getting through this. And if we didn't have that familiarity, if we hadn't had the opportunities to not just get to know each other, casually at a meeting, but to truly learn from each other and gain an in-depth perspective of some of the opportunities and challenges that different state leaders are facing in their regions, it's just better. It's made it so much more effective and efficient to deal with the challenges being posed by the pandemic, and quite frankly, getting the commission's work done through the pandemic. And I'm so thankful that all of us collectively put the time in to build on that. And I do think that, again, when we eventually recover and come out of this, we'll be all stronger for it. Because in a weird way, even though you started this by stating it correctly, I'm a people person, and that's how I engage. I've actually developed deeper relationships with folks through this because of the need, because we've had to engage in depth on an hourly, daily basis. And, instead of having to, set a time to meet in DC and folks fly in and you get 30 minutes in the office and that's it. In this virtual world, without a commute, without having to travel, you actually do, in a weird way, have more time to connect with people and talk through issues. And so, interestingly enough, while I'm ready to go back to normalcy and to meeting in person, there have been some benefits to these virtual conversations, in that you can have them more frequently and more in depth than we might have when we were having them in person. And so, to your very first question about what are some things that may stick post-pandemic, maybe some blending of the virtual and in-person, we may be able to find our maximum efficiency.
Well, very good. And if we go back to NARUC, I think your colleagues at the FCC would benefit from putting as much effort into the NARUC relationships as the FERC has with you and your colleagues. As we wrap up, I'm wondering if you have any advice for the regulated community generally as it pertains to FERC, or more specifically in this period of virtual meetings as opposed to in-person meetings?
I just think it's, and I think folks have been doing a good job of it, pre-filing, having those conversations, meeting with staff, briefing with staff. It's as important as ever. Staff is extremely accessible. And so we have truly adapted well to this environment. We're not just checking boxes. We're doing the job, and we're doing it well. Our certificate applications that come in, we're thoroughly examining and evaluating them and taking that stakeholder input on the filings that are coming into the commission. We're having those pre-filing meetings. We're going about our business. And so I don't want folks to think that just because they're not able to come to the commission in person, that in some way makes it less significant or less important to engage. It's more important than ever. I know all of my colleagues, Commissioner Glick, Commissioner Danley, Commissioner McNamee, have been totally accessible through this process and will continue to be so. So yes, just please continue to engage with the commission. The development of our record is important. Working through issues with staff before you file is important. We're open for business. We're open for communication, and please continue to count on our process.
Well, we appreciate those efforts that you, your colleagues, and the staff have made to keep those communication channels open. So thank you for that. And we'll be going to Q&A shortly, but before we do, Mr. Chairman, thank you so much for joining us today. You honor us with your presence and your perspective. You're doing a great job. It's a hard job. We appreciate it. And this is something that is obviously a big part of the EEI 2020. And so again, thank you.
Appreciate, again, the opportunity. Thank you for having me. Thank you for the kind words. I will simply close by saying that I understand I'm able to do my job today because I stand on the shoulders of those who served before me. I thank you for your many years of service to the commission, for your friendship and your guidance throughout my tenure. And while I appreciate all the kind things that you have said about me, I know full well that I wouldn't have been able to tackle some of these challenges without the mentorship and guidance from folks like yourself. So thank you.
Well, that's very nice. Thank you. All right, we'll open it up to questions now.